40% of the fresh food produced in the United States every year gets thrown in the garbage. So we have a distribution problem. So it's like, how do we get that food so that it's not locked up in the restaurant refrigerator overnight and it's actually somewhere where somebody can access it and buy it? We wanted to change American food systems and get that food from being stuck inside of refrigerators to where people can buy it, to minimize food waste and, nourish human beings. The bottom line is like, how do you get your products to your customers and kind of meet them on their terms?
I've definitely seen a lot of these vending machines not getting a lot of action. And I'm always curious, like, what separates ones that are successful from ones that are not, in your opinion?
It usually parallels, it's the same sensibility that makes like a restaurant successful or not. So like real estate.
You need millions of dollars to start a hardware software company. Why is that kind of a misconception that you disagree with?
I think one of those big things is that...
What's been some key advances and problems that you've solved there that have made this a reality now?
I think what our secret sauce is, Andy, is that we use...
Nathan, welcome to the show. Really excited to have you. As I was preparing for this, it's not often I find someone who's, worked in a restaurant and moved into the tech space. I to a certain extent, I've spent a lot of time working in restaurants and working for restaurant companies, and then have now moved into the technology space. And it's not common. I meet a lot of folks who've done both, but you have taken that to a far greater level than I ever could imagine. I mean, you've worked from all different types of restaurants into Michelin-starred concepts as a chef, and then you just decided, left turn, I'm gonna go, start a tech startup, which is really, really, really wild and interesting. What made you decide to leave one of the most prestigious chef jobs in the country to start over in tech?
I think really it was proximity. So, as you mentioned, and first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I appreciate it. When I was in my teens, I was kind of, doing like the New York pizzeria things, and then all the way over to California and some more refined environments. But when I was working in San Francisco, and more specifically, I was partner in a cafe group, I was seeing all these like game-changing technologies were happening right in front of my face. So like this is a pretty tall claim here, but the first photo ever taken on Instagram was of our espresso machine. And that's because the founder, Kevin, was in there every single day for a year and a half in the early days of Instagram. The little swipe dongle that people use for Square.
Totally.
I saw that when it was just a little microchip that was green, and the Jack Dorsey was explaining that he's like, you swipe it and it makes a noise and it can translate that into numbers. So these things were happening every day in our cafe, and I was seeing that, and I started to think, hey, I think I want to get one foot in tech and one foot in food. That is kind of how I started my career, and that's kind of how it all started, was just proximity of seeing these things happening and thinking, hey, I don't know where this is going for the world of food, but I want to be part of that journey.
Oh, wow. I resonate with that a lot. I think, food and drink is one of those things that continues to bring society together in a world of increasing technology, permeating everything. Still, food and drink is a really important part of our lives because we need it to live, but also socially, from a social construct perspective, I think like that's not going to go away. And so I agree. I definitely resonate with the whole, I feel like there's something here, that crossover between tech and food. How do we navigate that? However, you've made a bet on a really interesting, part of the food tech industry, and I think I really want to dive a lot into this, what you're doing with FoodSpot and smart and then like the vending space, right? Because people will think of technology and food, and they'll think of Uber Eats, or they'll think of online ordering, or projected kitchen make times and using AI to do voice drive-through and stuff like that. But vending, help sell our listeners on vending, because a lot of folks think about like restaurants and technology, don't think as much about like the vending they might see around campuses or airports or otherwise. Talk to us about why you made the bet there.
Yeah, and it's kind of a continuation, Andy, of what I was explaining before. So after I had my hands in food, and then I switched gears and started working in Silicon Valley with like food technology companies that were all like venture capital, and things moved around very quickly and lots of growth, and it was a very exciting time. But the common denominator for me for every place that I've ever worked is feeding people and nourishing people. It's just when you bring in technology, you can start to like amplify that, right? So eventually I landed in a robotics company called Chowbotics, and it was the world's first fresh food vending robot. And I kind of got a taste for that. And I was in a pure business development role. And then I started to understand the global market that
Uh-huh.
technologies like it, especially in Japan, for decades, they've had these technologies where
Right.
you can get high quality fresh food 24 hours a day. And I started to understand that the US is decades behind on these things. And that's really what, again, it was proximity, right? And seeing what's happening around me and learning that the US is way behind. And then when the pandemic happened, I think that was that paradigm shift that, I think the US is ready to finally catch up with not just Asia, but, Europe and
Mhm.
Australia in different parts of the world have been doing this for a long time.
So, but how do you go about then convincing like chefs and founders and other food concepts that vending isn't just this like selling out or just I don't care about the food sitting out there, people can get it whenever, but how do you convince them that it's actually helping level up their game and addresses a specific need? Well, what is your messaging around that?
Yeah. So for us, like for me as the, CEO founder of FoodSpot, and when we talk about smart vending, there's, the unitaskers where you can get, cupcakes or hot ramen or smoothies. For us, the smart just kind of the catch-all multitasker. And we really it's really whatever you want it to be. So we work with some of the biggest, franchises and chains in the US. And we also work with some of the most like small brand forward boutiques in the US. And when I say boutiques, I mean in terms of like restaurant or people that are creators of fresh food.
Mhm.
And really, it's all about the bottom line is like, how do you get your products to your customers um, and kind of meet them on their terms? But the difference is it's not just about the customers and maybe you have a certain condo that's in your city and there's a high density of your target customers, or maybe it's the gym that they love to go to because you're clean meals, whatever it is, where your community naturally comes together. And it's like, how powerful is it to be able to meet them where they're already going? But on the flip side, there's also an empowerment there for the operator because all of a sudden you're not tied to having to be there every single day for lunch rush and dinner rush. You can provide this to your customers and you can make it whenever you want it. You can stock it whenever you want it. So you've removed kind of the time coefficient. And then when you look at other things like the ability to be able to open anywhere, right? So for
Right.
you know $10,000, you can open a brand new mini brick and mortar. So you've also you've removed a lot of the constraints around cash flow. So it's really in that regard, it's just kind of a different, for certain operators, it can be a game changer, kind of like for their empowerment and freedom as well.
Yeah, that's really interesting because one of the biggest challenges in food is that there definitely is a bit of a haves and have-nots in terms of quality access to food. And I've seen like for FoodSpot, for instance, you're putting these smart fridges in food deserts. Campuses, hospitals, but I thought food deserts was a really interesting one where so many communities don't have good access to fresh food, well-made food, and there can be many constraints getting things there, but it, it seems like you're almost democratizing what fresh food could be. What do you see? Where do you see that going? Do you see that being a trend that's going to really continue and stick? And then what do people get wrong when they think about like this unattended food concept? Because if there is something about it not being attended, but still being fresh, healthy, quality food, like what do people have misconceptions there around that?
Yeah, I think there's two different types of scenarios for like, and that's our mission as a company is like to democratize access to fresh food. So it's like, how does that play out? You have what we talked about before. There's environments where um, there's food insecurity, which is basically like that could be the nurse at 2 a.m., the college student at 10 p.m. Maybe you just
Mhm.
got off at 11 o'clock at night, or
Oh, I've been
or
there. All the
or
stores are closed, and you're like, "I need something."
Right, or you're walking into the hotel, and it could be a really nice hotel, but you're like, what is it, a bag of nuts and, a
Right.
protein
Yeah.
shake? Things like these are all different environments where the person may have the money and they can buy it, but there's just no proximity, so they're food insecure at those times. And then I think what you were referring to was more like food equity. So sometimes you be in impoverished areas where, again, we 40% of the fresh food produced in the United States every year gets thrown in the garbage. So we have a distribution problem. So it's like,
Yeah.
how do we get that food so that it's not locked up in the restaurant refrigerator overnight and it's actually somewhere where somebody can access it and buy it, or it can be, acquired through a subsidy. So we're in a lot of like, manufacturing plants where they have like three shifts, and all of a sudden the employees are like, a month ago, I could only get a Coke and maybe a Hot Pocket, and now I can get, something quality. So it's all about kind of getting the accessibility out there. And a lot of our higher education campuses, there's students that are fully subsidized. They don't pay anything and they can just use the smartphone app and have full access 24 hours a day. So it's really kind of working with fresh food companies to say, how do we solve either food insecurity or food equity? And it's just really, when it goes well, it's just a really cool thing to see because kind of like everybody in the equation wins.
Right. It becomes a rising tide lifts all ships. But you meant like I would imagine if I was a fresh food company, I mean, is it that the problem that you're solving is just the technology and the hardware capabilities of that, that product able to support that fresh food I'm making? Is that kind of what you're bringing into the equation there?
Yeah. So all of our clients are fresh food companies, and they use our smart fridge so they can sell their fresh food 24 hours a day. And we talked a little bit earlier about some of the potential environments that they go
Right.
into. But that's really what it is kind of empowerment for them and their customers. And it's a real paradigm shift towards like traditionally what was like the formula for being a restaurateur.
Yeah, it's like we've made what advancements in technology have you in terms of what you're doing from at FoodSpot, for instance, have you seen be the most impactful to making that a reality? Because for a while, right, people couldn't put fresh food in these types of vending machines and have that be something that's safe and quality. What's been some key advances that and problems that you've solved there that have made this a reality now?
Yeah. So first of all, I just want to acknowledge that like this is a really noisy space right now.
Right.
So
There's a lot.
6 or 7 years ago, you walk into an airport and you wouldn't see any smart vending today. And smart vending encompasses this, but in an airport, you can get cosmetics, electronics, personal health care, fresh food.
Legos.
Yes. There's
Yeah.
a really Lego machine that I saw the
Yeah.
other day. So
Yeah.
like the that's the telltale sign for every country that we've opened that there's a mass adoption is starting to happen. When you see that happen in airports is kind of like the early signal. But there's also, now that that's happened, there's also a ton of companies, especially that are like manufacturing in China and just slapping a credit card reader on the front, that are saying it's a smart fridge. We've had credit card readers on vending machines for a very long time, so that doesn't, opening a door versus waiting for a little spiral to drop something out, is not kind of the game changer. The game changer is when you start talking about user experience and things like food safety. So there's four players when we talk about smart fridges that are in the US and with us, that make up about 95% of the market. And then the other 5% is, people that are just kind of slapping technology together. But I think what our secret sauce is, Andy, is that we use RFIDs, our technology. So we're not only tracking inventory with RFID stickers, but we're also tracking individual product expirations. So food safety is really what that's all about. And for us, what we focused on day one is we want to be like the best at selling high volumes of high quality food. Our other three competitors, there's things that they're better at than us, and each company kind of has its own niche within that. But technologies like using scales or using AI like cameras are not super accurate when you talk about tracking individual products and like what's the expiration date. So that's kind of where we sit.
Yeah, in terms of fresh food, that's huge. I know even when there's, like an E. coli outbreak or a listeria outbreak or something like that, the RFID is like the way people are able to narrow that down really quick to, hey, it was this one farm in Arizona that's producing this iceberg lettuce. Like that's where we need to go. And that's been a huge advancement. And so I'm curious, is there then just a lot of big data that comes out of that you're able to use to provide analytics on to really give people a little bit of that edge in terms of the margin? Is that where you see a lot of growth there?
Absolutely. I mean, the data is like incredibly important to be able to like help inform people. So, for example, like whenever somebody buys one of our smart fridges, we have kind of like a kickoff meeting with them. And it's a real discovery around like, tell us about your business and your offering and your customers and where you want to put this. Because what we can do is we can look at the specific data from other operators across the US that have done exactly what they're doing. And it really helps us kind of consult and advise them on things that they ought to be thinking about that are really unique to their environments to like ultimately just like help them be successful.
That's really good. But you're talking with these operators, right? And ultimately, it comes down to all these other good things are great, but it does come down to the money in a sense, right? I mean, they're still a business; they still need to run that business, right? What what separates a smart fridge or a piece of hardware like the ones that you guys sell? What separates one from one that's successful, just like printing money for these operators, versus one that just kind of collects dust? Because I've definitely seen a lot of these vending machines not getting a lot of action, at airports and what have you. And I'm always curious, like I know there obviously there's low labor cost on those, but like to a certain extent, how are they doing? How are they bringing in profits for these folks? What separates ones that are successful from ones that are not, in your opinion?
It usually parallels, it's the same sensibility that makes like a restaurant successful or not. And there's a few things that, right? So like real estate, the analogy that we use is like filet
Sure.
mignon and or hot dogs and, Pennsylvania. So it's when you look at it's like you want to be in a great building, but you also want to have a great footprint within the building. So real estate, real estate, real estate, right? Like your location is incredibly important. Um, the other little things that you might see in a restaurant, like does the table wobble? Is the bathroom clean? Like those telltale signs, all of that attention to detail, homework, it translates to our vending machines too. You're not throwing Snickers and Snapples in there and like, walking away.
All right.
There's merchandising aesthetic. How full is it? What's your variety of products? Like you really want to communicate a sense like to consumers that's like inviting, engaging, and then also like there's Americans are a little apprehensive sometimes, as they should be, of buying a $12 sushi roll out of a vending machine
Right.
that could expire within 24 hours, right? So you need to convey that sense that like there's a lot of care and thought that goes into this. And then the other piece is just like, how relevant is your offering 24 hours a day? Because you may have a restaurant where you make the best, you do a killer lunchtime business. But if you're opening a smart vending machine that's open 24 hours a day, you may
Right.
want to like, how do we stay relevant through that period? So those are the sensibilities that we walk our operators through. But at the end of the day, we're a piece of equipment and,
Mm.
and it's the experience that our operators are gonna make.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's that saying it's 5 o'clock somewhere, but at the same time, I haven't reached for a sushi roll in the morning for breakfast, that I can remember. So I think there's certainly something to that. It seems like you've just had a ton of learnings throughout your career. You mentioned Chowbotics. They were acquired by DoorDash at one point, right?
Correct. Yep.
Did you exit that business before that acquisition? After that acquisition?
So I was shortly before that acquisition
Okay.
is when I left. So I left early pandemic.
Like you said, I mean, people have been, looking into this space in terms of how does this come into the states, especially because it's been such a big thing overseas. So you've had a lot of really interesting and relevant experience. What's a lesson you learned? Look, we'll just use Chowbotics as a specific example. What's one lesson you learned at Chowbotics that still guides how you build today? Like, what's something you've carried forward that was a good learning that you still leverage at FoodSpot?
I think one of the things that was like a real driver. So when I was at Chowbotics, I was doing sales, business development for like North America, and it really just taught me that there is absolutely like a strong need for this. Like when I talked to hundreds and hundreds or probably even thousands of people when I was there, I learned that yes, the North America is ready for this type of technology. People, operators want it, consumers want it. But I think the bigger learning that I had, and Chowbotics, the fresh food vending robot, was like super cool and fun if you ever got the chance to experience it. But it also had a lot of complexity for operators. It was this big, beautiful carousel. Have you ever seen it, or
Yeah,
is
yeah,
this
yeah, yeah. It's a lot, is kinda what I would say about that.
each vertical canister is full of like fresh ingredients and they're like dropping into a bowl. There's a sense of like theater, and it was awesome. However, pretty complex for operators to use. Also for consumers, there's certain people that just kind of see that and they're like, oh, this is out of my comfort zone. I don't know how that works. So you can alienate certain consumers with technology as well. So I think one of the learnings that I had is we're coming into a new market. Just keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah.
It's our product is a refrigerator. It's like you swipe your credit card, the door unlocks, you open it, you take what you want, you close the door, you walk away. That's very approachable by a 6-year-old or an 80-year-old kind of conceptually is like, I got this, right? So I think that was the big takeaway because changing American behaviors is incredibly expensive and complex.
Yeah, maybe one of the hardest problems on earth.
Yes, yes, especially in this country. So
That's true. Was there okay, you mentioned you was there one thing, was there one moment or some sort of aha moment you had where you're like, "Ah, America is ready for this." Was there some moment you flash back to and you're like, "That's when I knew."
yeah, honestly, there is one moment. I was at the Mayo Clinic and we were demoing this, and like we went in, did a demo, and we just leave it set up for like a day. And I was there in Rochester, Minnesota, and we set it up, and you kind of have to do demos for all like the decision makers and stuff like that. But then I just sat back, I had my computer, and I just was kind of working on my computer, but in the distance I could see like,
Right.
and I just watched people in hospitals. We focus on hospitals and higher education because they're quick to adopt new
Yeah,
technologies and they have
certainly
24
closer
hours.
in.
So I sat back and I just watched the faces of the people that worked there and the emotion. And in particular, there was like a couple groups of nurses that like worked daytime, but they also worked the nighttime shift. And
Mm.
you could see the emotion in their face of like, I'm a hardworking, like professional person, and I've been, brown bagging it for however long every single night. They got to bring their lunch with them. And just because the cafes closed, and they were like so relieved and like excited to have just like another option for high quality fresh food during the night shift that didn't require them to like have this. And it was pure like the emotion on their faces. And then they looked at each other and it was all kind of like validating. And I was like, that's it. Like, there's nothing unique about this situation. Like nurses across the country. My mother was an RN for 35 years at Stanford. So it's like that. I'm like, just if you won nurses over, like this is like a real viable thing. And then as we got into it deeper, you see that it's kind of a more universal thing. But that was a moment that's always stood out in my mind.
That's really cool. I love that. I think there's something so true about that. The intuition that comes from just seeing one success and because some people are like, well, we need to analyze all the big data. We need the numbers. How do we do this at scale? And it's like, nurses and you see this situation and that this exact thing happens, thousands to 100,000 times all over the country every day where they're coming up to some sort of vending machine because they're just like, on the clock. And to see like you were successful right there, you're like, aha, this totally will work. I don't need a lot of other things. I can see this being, we can prove this out. We can bring all the numbers, but you just knew this is going to be a success.
Yeah. Well, and let me rewind a little bit. On the flip side, when I was in my 20s, I was also a campus executive chef at UC Berkeley.
Okay.
So happening on the campus side of higher education, where I knew that there was food insecure students, but again, the food was locked up inside all the coolers, and we'd have catering events, and there's all these leftover food, and I'm like, how do we get this to people faster? Like this distribution's broken. So I kind of had it already ingrained in me from earlier experiences in my career that like there's pain points that operators want to solve too, but they just didn't have the right tools.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like if we can just like, there's a desire, a need, there's a problem, but it's about finding the right tools and letting technology get to the place that there's the right tools. I think a lot of people in a lot of different places have found that to be true for a lot of different use cases, not just in the the smart vending space. What do you feel like is a common mistake that people make in your industry that like you wish you could fix like overnight? Like what do you see people kind of going a little sideways or making a simple mistake that you notice and you say, "Hey, I think this could be different."
Well, I think more so, I referred to this a little bit earlier, but like there's so much noise and hype in the industry right now, which happens
Mm,
around
yeah, okay.
technologies when they're starting to like get mass adoption or a lot of traction early days. That's absolutely happening right now with smart fridges, where there's a lot of claims that are interesting that are made about different smart vending technologies, and most companies are good at one, maybe two things. And it's a big blue ocean. There is so much opportunity in this world right now in the US because it's the biggest market in the world and it's barely started to see adoption. So I think more so, um, there's not really good like third party information where people kind of can size up the market for you and say, hey, listen, like based on your criteria, this is probably the best smart fridge company or probably the best robotic smoothie vending company for you, whatever it may be, because there's a ton of options. So I think that's something that there's a lot of missteps and there's a lot of noise there. So it's something that just to, I think, kind of seek out podcasts and blogs and things like that. Maybe that's something that Chat GPT can help people kind of get on the right path. But for us as a company, we produce a ton of content and we talk about our competitors all the time and say, hey, here's where we're great, here's where they're great, and hopefully, you find the right path for your business to make a good decision.
That's great. I love that positive message 'cause there's a big green field out there, like you mentioned. That there's so much space, and it really, to especially to change an American behavioral that's a habit that's ingrained. It's really really hard to do, and so I think that it's a really interesting call to make sure that the industry's working together because there's so much. There's the pie can be so much bigger, from a business standpoint. Speaking of that, like from a business standpoint and the pie being a certain amount of size, something in kind of prep here that you had written, was the whole like the idea of like, here's something I believe in my core, but 99% of people in my industry disagree with this misconception that you need millions of dollars to start a hardware software company is something that you said that, this misconception that you need millions of dollars to do all of this, which in my gut, I thought like, oh my gosh, yeah, like, you must need a lot, like, to do something like this. How do you like hardware is incredibly complex because you need all that gear and that costs money. Talk about the startup of that. Why is that kind of a misconception that you disagree with that you need millions of dollars to start up something like that you're doing?
Yeah, well, I think it's no secret that the world is changing more now than it ever has, and it's kind of like self-perpetuating, right? That it's just every day it's changing faster and faster. And I think one of those big things is that you can outsource a lot of things that you couldn't previously outsource, to partner companies or, people are starting, we introduce a lot of AI into our business that helps us with some of the lift. I mentioned like Chat GPT taught me how to import export through Canada last week. Like there's all these things that you can do where you don't necessarily need like those subject matter experts and you can kind of chase what's most important. I know for us, when we started our company, we looked at it and said, you know, the being vertically integrated of like we make software and we make hardware and one of our major competitors used to also like do the food and the logistics, and it's incredibly cash intensive. So out of the other like three leading smart fridge companies in the US, I think two of them have been around for many, many decades. The other one's raised, I think, almost 20 million in venture capital. But for us, what we said is let's go out and let's find the best manufacturer of fridges. Let's not reinvent the wheel. They're great at that. Let's let them do that. And then they're just going to adapt it with our hardware. For software, my two business partners, based out of Singapore, they built out all the software. They had the platform. And we said, hey, let's partner on the US market. I mentioned earlier these little smart stickers that we use to track.
Yeah.
So we worked with the global leader, Avery Dennison, on that. And we said, let's have somebody else do our fulfillment. Because really, at the end of the day, what did we want to do? We wanted to change American food systems and get that food from being stuck inside of refrigerators to where people can buy it, to minimize food waste and, nourish human beings. So that's really what we're all about. So in essence, what does it boil down to? We're really a sales and marketing company, and we have partners that do all those things for us. And we just reached out to them and we shared the vision with them, and they subscribed to the vision. And we had to go through a lot of companies to find the right partners, but ultimately, we were able to get our company off the ground and running, and now we're a leader in this space for a tiny amount of money compared to what our competitors have invested to get to the same place.
Yeah, that's really good. You mentioned you mentioned AI. It's the hottest thing around all over the place, right? It's taking over a lot of conversations of how could this affect where we go in the future. I'm curious, from your perspective in the industry you're working in with FoodSpot, 10 years from now, what does this world look like around your industry? How should food creators be thinking about their brand access and ownership of that when you look forward to an AI and automation driven food world? Because obviously, while I'm sure it won't be everything's just robot kitchens and restaurants with chefs go away. That's certainly not going to be the case, but there's going to be a lot more happening from an automation perspective in the food space in 10 years than there is now. What should people be thinking about in that 10 years down the road from your point of view around those topics?
I think that there's going to be a lot of, again, pure opinion, gravitational
That's what we're here
movement
for, my friend.
towards mass, kind of the mass feeder. So you think about, you go to Target and you get a salad, and there's a company there, and it's a decent salad. There's going to be companies like that are the mass producers, where there's probably some sort of autonomous vehicle that's going and just like plugging the products right into what will be the future smart fridge, right? And there's really probably no human involvement. And the technology is all tracking the expirations, and it's taking out what it needs. And it's like this fully automated scenario where it doesn't necessarily make sense to have this big location. I mean, it's one thing if you're a Target and you're stocking inside a Target, but all of a sudden you can have all these like tiny little locations that are within, call it 25 to, 40 miles of wherever you're producing the products. And you can, send them all out to stock at 3 a.m. when there's no traffic and things like
Mhm.
that. So we can be a heck of a lot more intelligent about our distribution systems. With the traceability, again, we can push those waste numbers down really low. We can nourish those humans that need it a heck of a lot better. So that's kind of like the mass producers. And I'm really excited about changing that aspect of the food system and working with like the USDA. And the other end of the spectrum, where I think we kind of have this like stratification, is like with companies that are very unique and brand forward and tailored. I used the term boutique earlier, where they're going to get highly focused on, again, where do I meet my consumer on their terms, and how do I customize that experience? But it's more than just the transaction, right? Because I think when if you're looking at that Target salad, you're like, want something healthy, you get
Yep.
this. But when you look at that, if you're going somewhere and you're buying, a fig prosciutto salad out of a, something that's a little bit more high end from a brand that you love, it's like you've removed the cashier out of the equation from a business standpoint. You're like, great, it saves us money, but you're also losing out on the human connection.
Right.
So how do we bridge that human connection for those boutique brands where it matters, like your connection matters? So for us, we're very kind of forward on like our smartphone app, and there's having that be a really strong communication channel between the smart fridge and being able to travel with consumers everywhere we go. But I think that's something that's going to have to evolve dramatically to figure out like how do we help bridge that gap, because humans matter. And I think that's the conversation that keeps coming up with AI, right? Is like,
Yeah, that's right.
AI is not here to replace humans. AI is here to kind of supplement and
Augment.
and yeah, inject humans for the time and place where they matter most. And I think that's really going to be the most unique challenge, is figuring out how do we augment, or where do we inject humans. I don't have a crystal ball, but that's what I'm excited to see. And we're going to have to really pay attention to that and evolve our hardware, software experience around that.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm excited to see where this space goes and how it evolves, because I think it's really important, to your point, of it keeping a bit of the human touch as much as possible, and or using this to help, the humans be freed up to do more of the things that really matter in terms of, personal connection. You You've done so many different things throughout your professional life. I'm curious. I think we can leave our listeners with this. I always try to give some sort of a helpful question that they can take forward and learn, because you've got just incredibly unique experience. Is there any one decision that helped you find more fulfillment out of your work? Like, is there any decision you've made that's helped you feel more fulfilled as you've gone down all of these different journeys? What's one decision you've made there?
I think the first thing that comes to mind for me is taking self inventory. So we all do this, right? Like, I know for myself, like when I go camping is an example of, like, I get there, I get set up, all the stuff's where it's supposed to be. And then there's that moment where you're like, like, for me at least, it's like everything's set up perfectly. And maybe I'm just, just chilling. We had dinner, whatever. And there's this period where there's no technology, there's a
Mhm.
fire burning. My mind is like very kind of calm and at ease. And there's certain things in my life like that just kind of prompt, like, review, like, what's going on in my life and my career and my, with my family and whatever else it may be. One of the things that I started doing a heck of a lot more is increasing the frequency when I kind of do those self reviews and those self checks, because there may be certain things in my career or my company that I really love, that make me jump out of bed in the morning, but everybody has a whole list of things that they don't love about, being a good parent, being a good spouse, being a good, leader, whatever it may be. And it's funny, but like, I regularly now have this thing where I'll go on to Chat GPT and I'll just throw my problems at it and be like, are there new solutions in the world that I don't even know about?
Oh, that's
And
interesting.
every once in a while I get surprised. It's like weird, it's like this weird, like, digital therapy thing I have going on. But I take inventory a heck of a lot more than I used to, because, you know, again, the world is changing and there may be new solutions out there, or there may be new hardships that I welcome because it's going to get me to where I want to go with my family, my career, wherever it may be, a little bit faster. So I think that would be my 2 cents is, yeah, just take inventory more often, because the reality that existed 6 months ago is not necessarily what it is today.
Yeah, I hear that. I mean, this seems like something that you would be really suited for. Is like, can you leave us with like a top three books that you've read recently that you found really, really helpful, or just some top podcasts that you listen to? What are some things that our listeners can take away to further get into the mind of Nathan?
Yeah, so I would say for a very long time, How I Built This has always been one of my favorite
I
podcasts.
love that one. Yeah.
I think it's just very therapeutic is the word I would use, because if you're a founder or an entrepreneur, and it's hard and people just don't understand unless they've done it themselves. So that's
Right.
something. It's funny. It's like it's inspirational and therapeutic all at once. So that's great.
When you give the initial stinger, right, where they pull out some soundbite of like when the person was at like the lowest of the low, and they were like, I wasn't sure if we were gonna make it, and it like lands there. It's always just like I just like feel in my gut like, oh man, like I feel you. Like that's
Like, I wasn't gonna make payroll in 2 hours, and, like, you're like, "Ooh, like, I gotta listen to this episode." So, yes, that is, fantastic, because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what your business is. We're all humans. It's incredibly
Mhm.
demanding, and, sometimes sometimes it makes you kinda deflate the balloon a little bit with the stresses that we have on a daily basis.
It feels like you're more focused on a bit of like the mindset of where you're going at this versus say, the technology details itself. Like I could feel like someone in your world with the kind of company you work at, like you're thinking about like how do these sensors work and what kind of data can we get from all of this? And you really kind of are looking at it from a mindset perspective to drive your decision making. Is that something that you find that resonates with you?
Yeah, 100%, because it kind of helps me, Andy, be the person that I want to be through the process, because it's incredibly like stressful and the ups and downs from day to day and how the business pulls at you. It's really easy to like lose center. But when you think about it more conceptually, and I'll say this, like today we use RFID stickers. I told you that
Right.
earlier, like hang our hat on that. Well, I mean, AI and camera vision, it's not there yet, but it's going to get there in the coming years where we're going to
Yeah.
kick this technology to the curb and switch gears. So it's like our concept is simple enough. It's a box that's cold and it tracks inventory, right? Like as effectively. So the technologies are going to like come and go and evolve and all that's going to change. But I think that mindset just helps me kind of keep my eyes on the prize, keep like even keel, be the person that I want to be for, myself, my team and my family. And that's what works for me.
And I love that. Awesome. Well, Nathan Downs, thank you so much for joining this show. I really appreciate your time. I'm excited to see what you guys do going forward with FoodSpot and beyond. Like I think there's such a big, interesting world out there, and a lot of really good problems y'all are trying to solve. And I'm really excited to see where you take this. And I really appreciate the time. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Brilliant. Thanks for the opportunity.
Restaurant Reset is sponsored by Genius for Restaurants, the modern point of sale system from Global Payments. Genius helps you reach your most important goals, whether that's simplifying your operations, speeding up your checkouts and table turns, easily expanding into new locations, or building loyalty with guests. To find out more, visit globalpayments.com/genius.